I'm going to just give kind of a general overview of volunteering in Ireland, and particularly among older adults, and hopefully show you some of the benefits of volunteering. And I'm guessing a lot of the people tuning in now are volunteers themselves. So if you're like me, you might not have been kind of aware that what you're doing gives so much benefit to you. Like from my perspective, it's just kind of something that you do, and I suspect a lot of people are the same, but hopefully I'll give people a little bit of motivation to keep doing what they are doing, and in conjunction with Oliver as well, see the kind of opportunities that there are for people. So I'm just going to share my screen now. Hopefully it will go smoothly. Now. Okay, so as Claire said, my name is Mark Ward, and I'm a researcher with TILDA, which is the Irish Longitudinal Study on Aging, and I'm here, or Niall's invited me here, predominantly in that role as a researcher, and I'm going to focus on kind of giving you some information that we've been collecting over a number of years. As Claire also pointed out, I'm a member of NAFINA here in Dublin 9. And I help out with the 2010 girls in camogie and football. So you can see our gang there on the left-hand side from a blitz before COVID kicked off, unfortunately. So we have in the region of 70 girls at 3 sessions a week. So you can imagine it takes a huge number of parents and other volunteers to help arrange that. And, you know, I think as someone who, as a GAA man, it kind of breaks my heart to see the kids missing out on the opportunities that they get at these sessions. But hopefully we'll all be back there not too long from now. So what I'm going to do over the next probably 15 minutes or thereabouts, I'm first going to give a general overview of volunteering in Ireland, and then introduce you to the Irish Longitudinal Study on Aging, and show you some of the findings from the research we've conducted there on volunteering, and show you how, you know, the proof is there that it's good for people's physical and mental health. And I'm going to finish on a not so good news story probably, and just show you how the COVID pandemic has been affecting both volunteering and the well-being of older adults in particular. And I do that, I suppose, to kind of focus minds in a way. And I think as the vaccines start rolling out, and hopefully that'll be successful over the next few months, I think we should all start focusing really on how we emerge from this and get back to what we were doing, and get back to, you know, even doing things better than we were before the pandemic hit. And it's hard to believe that it's almost 12 months now. But as I say, hopefully with the vaccines, we can see light at the end of the tunnel. So somewhat surprisingly, actually, there's information on volunteering across the population. It's pretty hard to come by. Now, this study here is from the Central Statistics Office from 2013. And this was among everyone over the age of 16. And what they found was over 1 million people, or over a quarter of the adult population, said that they volunteered to some extent over the previous year. And the majority of volunteers tended to be over the age of 45. And they also found among volunteers that they reported very high life satisfaction, and higher life satisfaction than those who didn't volunteer their time to different things. Compared to other European countries, then Ireland performs really well, actually. So you see here among the over 50s, 41% of Irish people say that they'd volunteer, and this is 10% higher than the EU average. So as Claire alluded to at the beginning there, like Ireland has a very good record in terms of volunteering, and we've much higher rates than a lot of countries. And as you'll see in a moment, like the GAA is one of the kind of major recipients, we'll say, of those efforts. So what types of organizations do people volunteer in? So we find the biggest group is in sporting organisations, educational and cultural, and that include the GAA, and then also community and social services, and a smaller amount then in charities and political parties, and voluntary services. So data from Tilda shows that so people aged 58 and older, when they were asked about membership of sporting organisations, over 1 in 10 were a member of the GAA. And we see the kind of sports that the GAA be traditionally competing with, if you like, are way, way lower than that. And Niall, who introduced the session this evening, will give you far more detail on GAA membership specifically in his talk tomorrow night, and some of the benefits around that. But as you can see here, like a lot of people volunteer at the GAA. I think we all are aware of that. And I suppose sometimes it can be forgotten that, you know, the GAA isn't all about the big summer Sundays in Croke Park, or even Parnell Park, the big club games. You know, there's an awful lot of work goes on behind the scenes, and my own club is huge in size. Like, as I said, we have somewhere like 70 girls at under 10. The boys at that age group, there's over 100, and that's replicated in all those age groups. So you can imagine there's a huge amount of effort needed to keep those teams ticking over, keep them training, even just organising matches and referees and the like. And for our own group, we have somewhere like 15 people who give up their time, as I said, 2 or 3 times a week. And a lot of those people were roped in just to tie shoelaces when we had the kids at the nurseries and the likes of that. And once they get in behind the fence, I think they get hooked, and they immediately start to get enjoyment out of it themselves. And obviously the girls benefit massively from it as well. So, as I said, I work with the Irish Longitudinal Study on aging, and I'm a researcher there. And my focus is really on kind of figuring out what are the things that make people age well. What are the things that keep us healthy and happy as we get older? So I'm particularly interested in things like loneliness, social participation, volunteering, quality of life, and so on. So I just want to give you a quick bit of background on the study before I give you some results, just so you know where I'm coming from. So Tilda began in 2009, and 8,500 people aged 50 years and older were recruited at that stage. And Tilda goes back to the same people every 2 years and conducts interviews, and every 4 years it does full health assessments. So people come to a health assessment centre in Trinity, and we test everything from walking speed to taking hair samples and the whole lot. And what we're really interested in finding out is how all these things come together. So how do your health behaviours affect your health? How does your early life experiences affect your health? How do your social networks affect your health, and so on? So we collect information across the whole range of people's lives. So everything from their diet to who's in their family, to who's in their social circle, to how much they drink, smoke, whether they drive or not, their work scenario, and so on. And try to paint a picture then, as I said, of what are the things that make people happy and healthy as they age. And this is where volunteering kind of comes out time and time again as one of the key drivers or constituent parts of that. Now, often when we think of older adults, and certainly you'll have seen this in the media, and more so since the COVID pandemic began, older adults are often framed as in terms of being, at risk, needing help, being vulnerable, being a burden. Like I'd say the two pre-COVID, the two kind of most commonly cited topics around an aging population. So as we all know, people are living longer, healthier lives, which should be a good news story. But if you were to read the focus solely on the media, it's almost sold as a problem that people are living longer. They're a drain on our pensions, they're a drain on our economic system, they're a drain on the health service, and so on. This kind of was almost a tipping point at the beginning of the pandemic, where there was debates, particularly in some of the worst of the British media. You can see in the right-hand side here, the Telegraph, of, we'd be better off letting old people die, let the virus run wild, and think of all the economic savings we'd make, and think of all the savings, to the health service and so on. So one of the things that Tilda is very much focused on is on trying to kind of challenge that narrative that can be out there. And what we find, or have found, following these same 8,000 people over the last 10 years, is that older adults make a massive contribution to their families and their communities. So almost 40%, just over 40% provide childcare. So that enables families to continue working and not at the expense of paying for private childcare facilities. Half provide financial support to their grown children, half provide financial support to their own parents when they're still alive. And we also see that almost 1 in 5 volunteer at least once a week, right? Which is really regular volunteering. So 1 in 5, so that equates to hundreds of thousands of adults giving their time freely every week. So it's far from, I suppose, the kind of draining narrative that can sometimes be in the media, and people make a massive contribution to their communities through their volunteering and other kind of things that they do. So what I want to focus on is rather than the kind of benefits that brings to the people that they provide help or volunteer with, to how that actually benefits their own well-being. So in terms of the frequency of volunteering then, so these figures would be from before the pandemic, and we found that 56% of people reported that they'd volunteered at least once over the previous 12 months. And as I said already, almost 1 in 5 do that at a weekly basis. One of the kind of key turning points or life events, I suppose, in terms of volunteering is around retirement. So we find that when people retire from work at 65 or around that, a lot more begin volunteering. And I think that points to possibly one of the barriers to people giving their time like this. And that's simply the time. When you're working and maybe raising a family, it can be hard to get the time to give over to an organization, whether that be the GAA or somewhere else. But I think it does point to, even though we've really strong or good levels of volunteering, I think there's still an untapped resource there as well, that there's more people out there who do want to give their time. And I think the GAA has probably been better than a lot of other organizations in some ways in giving people an opportunity to actually do that. And I think Oliver will possibly touch on this in the next talk, but providing the opportunity and kind of inviting them into the fold, if you like. Like, as I said, there's probably 4 or 5 of the volunteers that help out with our group were brought on board by simply asking them to hand out bibs at the start of a session, or, as I said, tie the kids' shoelaces, or make sure the kids don't run away, which is an important job with a 5 or 6 year olds. And as I said, once you get over the line, it's hard to leave it. It's hard to leave it again. So in terms of the benefits of volunteering, so as I said, we've looked at a whole host of different kind of markers or indicators of well-being with older adults, and consistently, so time after time, and whether it's women, men, older, younger adults, or whatever, we find people report better quality of life, more purpose in life, far higher life satisfaction, fewer depressive symptoms, better self-rated physical health, better self-rated mental health. And also from the measures we take at the health assessment, they've better objectively measured physical health measures as well. So I think volunteering is just kind of good for the soul, and I think it helps. I think it feeds into a kind of fundamental human need for kind of social interaction and purpose as much as anything. To actually feel like you're contributing something and seeing a result in the end, and seeing that, you know, where you getting up on the Saturday morning and maybe driving across the city or whatever to help out with a team or whatever way you want, selling lotto tickets or whatever it might be, that there's an end result to it, and you can kind of see the joy that other people get from your endeavors. And I hope, and the evidence would suggest from Tilda at least, that people do kind of get that almost warm feeling of having done something worthwhile and having contributed something. So in 2017, then Volunteer Ireland did a survey of its members to try and figure out exactly what, again, volunteers were getting from their times and efforts. And similar to what we found, the volunteers that they included in their study, so they felt that they had purpose and value in their life. They made friendships, they got enjoyment from it, they felt that they grew personally and they could see their own development. And I think this fourth or fifth one is particularly relevant to the GAA, that connection to the community and actually feeling that you're part of not only your club's community, but the kind of broader GAA community. And again, I think the GAA has been very good in that, kind of giving you a sense that you do actually belong to it. Volunteering is also very good for people's self-confidence, and you can see that where people start volunteering and they might be a bit shy or a bit slow to speak up, and then over the course of a few weeks or months you can see their confidence growing. And I think, as I said already, it just gives people that kind of warm feeling and a purpose to their day outside of the normal day-to-day of work and our other responsibilities. Just very quickly, I suppose, that we conducted a study during the summer, so when the COVID pandemic had just begun, and obviously with the restrictions on social interactions and gathering and so on, the numbers of older adults reporting that they volunteer has plummeted since last March. So from over half before the pandemic struck down to 22% now. And I would worry that this is a bit of an overestimate. I'd imagine it's probably lower again now because, as I said, this happened during the summer. There was still some things happening. I think in some respects there was nearly a novelty to it, and people put their newfound spare time, if you like, to things like DIY and extra volunteering and getting involved in groups. But those opportunities have, you know, been taken from us, and necessarily so, to stop the spread of the virus. So I hope that those people who haven't had the opportunity to volunteer or participate socially since the pandemic has started will get back on board once it's possible to do so again. And this again, I think, is where we need to start planning for how we can provide opportunities for people and kind of get people back at least to the base they were at, if not an even higher place. Just to highlight as well, like the Tilda data has shown just how damaging the restrictions have been to people's lives. So if you look at this graph here, we're looking at a score in loneliness, and a measure we use. On the left-hand side, it's 2016, didn't change much to 2018. And you can see it shoots up then at the start of the pandemic. And again, my worry would be that this has only gotten worse as we got into this last lockdown. And we can see here for loneliness, like it's of, I suppose you'd say, kind of no surprise, but people who live alone are particularly have suffered particularly in this regard, where they mightn't have family networks or friends to draw on. The impact of a lot of this, so I've shown you already that volunteering, you know, people who volunteer a lot report fewer depressive symptoms since COVID had started. there's a really worrying increase in depressive symptoms among older adults. Again, as you can see over the preceding years, it's pretty level, doesn't change much, and it's shot up. And I think volunteering and other forms of participation and so on might be one of the ways that we can kind of, as a population, if you like, or as a society, kind of get out of this and hopefully flatten that line again and bring it down to at least where it was, if not below. So that was a very quick run through of some of the work we've done. Like, in a nutshell, we've very good levels of volunteering in Ireland. I still think there's more that can be tapped into. There's the desire there if you give people the opportunity to get involved. And I think it's important we start now kind of planning for how we improve that when we come out of the pandemic. For those of you here who are still volunteering now, or where previously I might have the opportunity now, I think keep doing what you're doing. You know, if you're not able to do it now, get back to what you were doing, and just remember all the kind of good that your efforts give to those, you know, with the organizations that you volunteer with, and also know that it's really good for you. You benefit for it as well. So even if it's just for selfish reasons, you know, please do try and keep your toe in and be involved as much as possible. Just very quickly then, there's loads of resources on the Tilda website around volunteering and all aspects of aging. So please do check it out if you want to get any more information. And there's a YouTube channel there as well. And just one final thing to say, some of you might have come across Tilda, are very involved in the Healthy Clubs initiative that began last year. And before COVID started, carried out a number of kind of information evenings around the country. The dear Micheál Murray-Hurtig is kind of the national face of that program. So hopefully we'll get those back up and going sooner rather than later. So keep an eye out for those. So I'm going to hand you over to Oliver, I believe, and then there's time at the end for any questions if people have anything. So thank you for listening in, and I'll hand you on now.
I might just come in there to thank you, Mark, and say it was fascinating, some really good stuff there, really interesting pieces. I think the loneliness and the depression piece and that sharp rise COVID began is something that we, I suppose we weren't aware of. And I think one of the questions coming in is around that, as to how to get more of this information out there, and we'll deal with that at the end. Okay. But keep your questions coming in because I think we're really on the cusp of some new information here this evening that a lot of people haven't seen before. We're going to move on now and introduce you to Oliver Keating. Oliver is a primary school teacher and is an active member of Westmeath GAA and a member of Mullingar Shamrocks Club. He delivers the volunteer recruitment and retention module on the GAA leadership development course. And we're very fortunate that Oliver has made some time here this evening to share his tips on volunteering, more specifically how healthy club officers can be an effective volunteer. And I suppose more importantly, how we can recruit others to assist us in our endeavours. So I'm going to hand you over to Oliver and keep your questions coming in.
Thanks very much, Claire. And yeah, I'd just like to just add to your comment on Mark's presentation there, some very interesting research. Thanks to Niall for the invitation to just chat to you for a while this evening on the area of volunteerism. So I'm just going to share my screen now with you. And that's popped up okay, Claire, it has, yeah? Yeah, okay. So just over the next 20 minutes or so, I'm just going to look at 5 key areas here. First of all, to look at why people volunteer. to describe a culture that promotes volunteerism, discover and understand methods of recruitment, be aware of volunteer development opportunities, and then once you manage to recruit new volunteers, how to hold on to them. So to help you with your recruitment of new volunteers, it's important actually to pause and just consider, why do people volunteer, and also why do they not volunteer? And, you know, I'm speaking to volunteers here this evening, and if you kind of think back for a moment to how you got involved in your club, and it might have been one of these reasons. Perhaps you were asked, family tradition, an opportunity to get involved in the community, something to do. The social aspect of it, it's an opportunity to make friends, supports career, supports children's involvement. Perhaps after a playing career, you wanted to give something back. And Mark mentioned this earlier, that being involved with your local GA club has been associated with something positive. Now, it's also important to consider the reasons why people are slow to get involved, why they don't volunteer. And it might be stating the obvious, but one of the reasons that people don't get involved is that they weren't asked. That, you know, there are people who are, how would you say, forward and will look to get involved, but there are many that, you know, they don't want to come across as being pushy. I have a little asterisk beside the next one. People don't volunteer because they feel that they don't have the required skills. And we can also link that to the last point on the slide there, that they lack a little bit of confidence. They think that they wouldn't be able to contribute. Another reason people don't volunteer is that the time aspect. They feel that once it starts, it won't stop. And I'll be touching on this later, how it's very important to be specific with people when if you're asking them to get involved. Sometimes clubs don't sell the positives of it, and like one of the key messages in Mark's presentation there was that the benefits to your health of volunteering. And I suppose the other side of that too, he touched on the levels of loneliness and depression have increased since people haven't had the opportunity to volunteer during COVID. So we're all belong to a club, and we're just going to look at, you know, and maybe it's a time just to reflect on your own club. You know, does your club, could you describe your club as a club that promotes volunteerism? And we're just going to look at, it's not a definitive list, it's just a couple of characteristics of a club that promotes volunteerism. So such a club would be an energetic place, full of enthusiastic people, well managed and safe, good image, reputation in the locality, welcoming, active and interesting, positive in its outlook and forward thinking, fair to everyone, well organized, where people's time is productive. And, you know, your club, is it a vibrant and successful organization? And, you know, during this downtime where we have no on-field activities, it is an opportunity to, you know, to set aside some time at a committee meeting. And, you know, as I said, that's not a definitive list, but it's still, you know, there's some good points there. And just to discuss amongst yourself, you know, how does our club rate when we go down through those characteristics of a club that would encourage people to get involved? So then I suppose we come to, how can you get more people involved in your club? We'll say new people into the club, and existing members, how to get them more involved. And I think just before we look at that, you should take time as a committee to, rather than just going straight in, right, we need to get more volunteers, is to look at all aspects of club life and see a kind of a task identification. Where do we actually need help? Rather than sending out an SOS that we need volunteers, that to look through the different parts of the club and see, yes, we could do it. We're a bit short-handed there. We need more help. So I'll be coming to that in a moment. So in terms of recruiting volunteers, probably one of the best methods was the individual contact, and you know, in the current climate, that's not possible at the moment, but that doesn't mean that the recruitment process can't start. That we'll say social media, direct emails to your members, and hopefully next month, possibly when activities resume, that clubs will probably hold their registration day. And registration day is a great opportunity to actually get new people involved in the club, because you have parents bringing down their children to register them. And I'll just show you kind of a sample form that you could use to get more people involved on registration day. Some clubs have held open days as well. Great way to showcase what you do, to show the positive work that your club does. But the personal contact, where it can't be face-to-face at the moment, that you know, you sit down as a committee, you try and identify groups of people that might be willing to get involved. And when we talk about those groups of people, you know, parents naturally enough are an obvious group. Also, as Mark mentioned earlier, retired people as well, that might find that they have a bit more time on their hand. Players that have finished up playing, that not to let them drift away from the club, that to try and get them back involved in some aspect of club life. And also current players, I think, are definitely worth involving, because what you're doing is you're setting an example, you're establishing a culture of volunteerism in your club, that if you can have, we'll say, the players on, we'll say, from your adult team, that, you know, you get a commitment from them that they'll come down to the underage coaching once a month. And, you know, what you're doing is setting an example for those younger players, that they see that in our club, that, you know, as you get older, that there's an expectation that you give something back. So that's important too. So in terms of, you know, you're recruiting your volunteers, that a very important concept here is the basic unit of voluntary commitment. And I mentioned there about the task identification, that you look at the areas that you need help on within your club. And each recruitment drive should begin with 1 hour of voluntary commitment. We saw there earlier, one of the points, or one of the reasons people don't get involved, is that one, you know, the pressure of time, or they feel that they can't give a commitment. But if you ask, you know, somebody, and you're very specific, and you say, can you give us 1 hour a week? You know, people will say, okay, I can manage an hour a week, rather than a sort of a loose, you know, would you be willing to give a handout with something? Because, you know, one person's interpretation of giving a handout can be very different to someone else's interpretation. So Each of these tasks are straightforward and easy to do, but when taken off the workload of a pressed volunteer, it can make a great difference to the running of a club. Mark gave two very good examples there. I mentioned about giving out the bibs, tying the laces. Like, on its own, they seem a very, sure, that's a very simple, ordinary task. But if you're trying to, you're organizing the coaching, like having as much help as possible. And, it's a good way to hook parents as well, that, parents that might be lacking a little bit of confidence, thinking, oh, I'd have nothing to offer at the coaching. You bring them in gently, and the thing about it is that if done in the correct manner, if you get people involved, they tend to stay involved. And I look briefly at how you can retain your volunteers, but I'm just going to switch. Hopefully this will come up for you. I mentioned there about registration day. Here's a little leaflet that, when parents are filling out their registration form for their children, that you have a one-pager here, and it is, can you give us 1 hour per week? And please tick, and one of our committee members will be in contact with you with more details. So you have a list of different activities that go on within your club, and a parent then kind of has a look and ticks one, put their name, contact number, and it's followed up afterwards. And again, you're selling that 1 hour a week is all we're looking for. Now, if you can get a dozen new people involved in your club, or 20 new people that can give an hour, that's 20 hours a week, which will have a positive impact on the club. So yeah, that's those kind of, as I said, some of them on their own seem pretty not too much of an ask, but when you put them all together, it contributes greatly to the running of your club. So in terms of, when you have your volunteers in, then it's important not to forget about them. You forget about them, you lose them. You need to give them opportunities to develop. And you have to tap into the skill set as well, that you'll have some people who want to get involved in the hands-on coaching side of things. You might have somebody who's more interested in getting involved in a subcommittee. Someone else might be interested in IT. So it's important that you give your volunteers an opportunity to develop. And I suppose I'm going to flag the program that I would have been involved in, the committee I was involved with, that the Club Leadership Development Program, an excellent program for people who are interested in taking on officer roles within the club. Underneath that, and it's on each of the slides there this evening, that the GA Learning Portal is an excellent source of material, advice, and it's there, learning.ga.ie/administrator. And also in terms of developing your volunteers, that, as a committee, if you have looked at getting people involved, that you remember to keep in touch with them, that it's not a case of, you have your recruitment drive, you bring them in, and then there's no follow-up contact. Follow-up contact is very important, and I think that's coming up very shortly there in terms of retaining our volunteers. So the retaining volunteers, then there's a framework, it's called the 6 R's of participation, and it's kind of outlines how important it is. It takes work to hold on to your volunteers as well. So you can see them there. And we'll go through them briefly, each one of them. Okay. So if we look at there, that the relationship, that it's important to make sure new volunteers are welcomed warmly, and that relationship is maintained. That and going back to the slide on the culture of a club that promotes volunteerism, that, you know, those first impressions are very important, that, you know, that a club is welcoming, and you know, a warm welcome is like, what I like about this framework is that it's not that technical. It's very, lot of it is common sense, and maybe stating the obvious, but sometimes we do have to state the obvious. Now, the role is very important. We're to provide a clear role description for every volunteer, that as a committee, if you're looking at getting people involved, that you're very clear about what it entails. And that's, you know, clear in terms of what is expected, and also in terms of the time it's going to take up. Like, if you think yourself, if someone approached you to do something, you know, if you're asked to do something, straight away, the first thing that's probably coming into our head is, how long is this going to take? So when we're approaching our potential volunteers, role description is very, very important. The next one, again, I'm repeating myself saying it's very important, recognition. To constantly acknowledge volunteers formally and informally. No matter what age we are, we all like, you know, a little bit of affirmation. And you know, sometimes people say, well, sure, they know we appreciate what they're doing. But I would say that it's important that a committee, that you actually, any chance you get, that you acknowledge the work that has been done by volunteers. I don't know if we've any club secretaries here tonight, but I think they have a very important role to play in that, like in their annual report, that, you know, they get possibly reports from the different subcommittees, that it's important that, you know, whether it's the pitch committee or the coaching committee or the bingo committee, that they are thanked and named in the report, that in the weekly club notes, if something of note happens, that the group looking after it, that they're acknowledged. Like, as I said, affirmation is very important. Respect, of course, no matter what walk of life we're in, that, you know, respect should be central to everything we do. People want their values, ideas, and time to be respected and considered in the club's activities. Results, and we're not talking here about winning championships or leagues or anything like that. What we're talking about here is delivering on plans. You know, that progress, that, you know, if somebody gets involved in an initiative or a project, that, you know, the targets that are set out at the start of the year, that progress is evident on that, because, you know, people will want to get involved in something that is positive and progressive. And I suppose the opposite is also true, that, you know, if there's no evidence of progress, people will sort of drop out. Finally, then, the last R is reward, to set aside a day to appreciate and recognize the effort of your volunteers. I know it's not possible at the moment, but it is something hopefully that might be possible later this year. And the good thing about a day for volunteers is that it sometimes brings together people who might never meet otherwise. Like, you know, Mark was mentioning figures there in the club, and I mean, and that's only the coaching side of it. I think a day, an appreciation day, gives an opportunity for everyone to meet up, and it's actually has a knock-on effect too, that you could get more people involved from something like that. So that framework of participation, the 6 R's, that the result of it is that people stay involved in your club. And in general, it's been shown that people stay involved because they feel valued, they feel their contribution is respected, they feel part of the group and do not feel excluded from decision making, and they feel a sense of pride that they have contributed to the club. They're associated with something positive. And again, what the framework prevents is volunteer burnout. And, you know, what contributes to burnout? The following factors: club is lacking in clear goals and direction, too much work to be done. There are often few rewards or recognition for a job well done. Too few people are involved. Over criticism, large fundraising responsibilities, and the role was not what they expected when they signed on. And that's where, again, going back to that, been very specific in what is expected if you do get involved in the role. The point there about too few people are involved. I know in our own club, and I help out with coaching, but we would have 6 coaches looking after about 35 players. And the great thing about having 6 is that, you know, if there's a Saturday or a day that someone can't make it, you don't feel like you're letting anybody down. There's still enough to carry it. So, you know, the more people that are involved, it lightens the burden. So then, just in conclusion, some top tips for recruiting. People are waiting to be asked, so ask them. You know, don't take it for granted that somebody will put themselves forward and say, look, I'd like to get involved in that. You have to go and ask them. Older people are the most willing volunteers, so involve them. Think beyond the inner circle. And, you know, I mentioned it earlier, try and get some good out of the current situation where you don't have all the club activities going on at the moment. So as a committee, you know, to sit down and to sort of reflect and assess the different aspects of club life and see, okay, where could we improve? And to improve, we'll need more help. How are we going to go about that? Link tasks with available skills and use wisely. That and that goes back to your task identification. You know, that you might have somebody who has, you know, a passing interest in the games, but would have an interest in IT, so would be very interested in helping out with the club website. Begin with an agreed volunteer commitment, the 1 hour commitment. You know, if somebody comes to you and said, you know, I'm looking for an hour a week, and especially if you go to you're approaching parents and their children are benefiting from maybe 2 to 3 hours a week involvement in the club, you know, it's very hard for them then to, if you approach them and say, can you give us 1 hour a week? Give affirmation. I really want to emphasize that one. Praise and reward, and the reward isn't anything, you know, it's a thank you, well done. You know, if it was the social committee had organized a presentation or something, that, you know, that was a great event. You know, it's little comments like that. Don't take anything for granted. Don't assume that they know you appreciate what they're doing. Praise and reward. Use your club database to recruit and inform. Like, I think on most club membership forms now, application forms, people put in their email address. And so while we're not meeting people at the moment, you know, there are ways in which, you know, you can make contact and look for help. Use the task identification idea to give people a focused and time-bound commitment. Teamwork counts. And have plans for recently retired players and coaches. They as I say, play and stay with the GAA. Okay, so that's me.
Thank you, Oliver. That's really helpful, really useful, really practical, I think, and lots of things there that can be easily implemented. Very, very useful. But just before we go to the questions, I just might add a few pieces, because I think we've had the older cohort and then perhaps the people who are getting involved. But I think there's a younger cohort here as well that it's useful to think about in terms of beginning them on their volunteer journey at a young age. And I know, again, the GA has some very good young leadership programs, like the Dermot Early Leadership Program that I'm very familiar with, because my own daughter was involved in it in Dublin, and it was hugely beneficial. And also in my own club, Nave Olaf in Sandyford, we have a Mullinoiga group from kind of 14 to 18. Usually it ties in a bit with transition years and moves on from that. But that creates this whole volunteer ethos where they then become involved with things like the summer and Easter camps. Maybe just in one year we painted the dressing rooms during the summer. They might run the cafe if there's a blitz on, or even on a Saturday morning. And they're a really useful bunch who begin to feel really valued early on in their careers. And some of them have gone on now to become PROs and club secretaries, and even gone on and studied in college in some of these areas as well. So I just wanted to mention that. I think it's important not to forget to seed that ethos, and particularly what they get from the rewards and getting to know people around the club is really beneficial. The other thing I just want to say from my own perspective is I'm involved in recruitment, and the impact that volunteering has when you look at a CV, or when you're interviewing somebody in these days of competency-based interviews, particularly where people are often asked to give examples about planning or organizing something, or maybe teamwork. And very often young people starting out their career don't have a lot of those examples. But if they are involved in clubs and involved in anything of a voluntary capacity, it's hugely beneficial. Like communications is another one. And if people get involved in it, the likes of a PRO role, look after the social media in the club, it really says a lot about them. It makes them stand out from others that don't have volunteering on their CVs. So I think that's, again, something that people can take away. And I was reading recently about what is one of the most important things that companies will be looking for from their employees, or when recruiting post-COVID. And the thing that stands out is agility. That ability to be able to change, to move with what's flowing, to move with what's going. And again, having the likes of the club on your CV and being able to move between roles, even up to senior positions, can add an awful lot to the table. So I just wanted to maybe knit the two sides together by bringing in that. We have a number of questions, and I promised you I wouldn't keep you too long, so I don't want to be the one to do it. Let's see now where we start. Okay, I think the first one was from Mark, the benefits of volunteering. But how do you get the message to the general population that would encourage more people to get involved?
Yeah, so I think that question was around the loneliness, Claire, wasn't it? It is a difficult one. I think, to steal from Oliver's ideas, as I will for many of them, I think for volunteering, I think the key thing is people are waiting to be asked. Ask them. Like from my own experience in my club, I would guess that probably less than half of the parents of the children in our group ever stood in a GAA grounds in their life before now. So bringing their child down was the first thing. And there's a natural reluctance there when they see ex-players who kind of know their way about. There's a reluctance to put their hand up sometimes to get involved. But if you ask them, you know, they tend to be more than happy to do it. And people bring different skills that I don't have, or other people within our group don't have. In terms of the loneliness, I think there's no quick answer to that. I think what we have to do is provide opportunities for people to mix. And I think kind of group-based activities tend to work best. Again, if you're chronically lonely, and often, sadly, that's associated with, you know, depressive symptoms or poor mental health, you're less likely to go out and proactively ask for support in that situation. So I think the best we can do as a society, and also GAA clubs, is provide opportunities for people. And that's things like the walking tracks, opening them up and maybe having designated times or whatever. Those kind of casual opportunities for people to mix and make contacts are kind of the key thing to, and unfortunately with COVID, they're the exact things that have been kind of stolen from us. And I think in part of the rise in loneliness that we see beyond COVID is the removal of a lot of these kind of casual opportunities. So if you think even in small towns where you might have a big supermarket outside the town now, so 20 years ago you'd walk into town, go to the butcher's, go to the post office or whatever, and you're meeting people in these, and it might just a casual chat, and that can be all it takes to kind of make someone feel that they have contacts. Whereas now if you're driving out of town to a supermarket, you're kind of robbed of those opportunities. So for what the GA can do, I think, is open your doors, give opportunities to people, get involved. Those who are there anyway, ask. The ask is kind of the key thing to it.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Some other comments in there, thanking you all for the presentations you both. A comment here: it's difficult to get parents on board as they need guarded vetting. I think, Oliver, this might be for yourself. Safeguarding and foundation courses before any interaction with children. Not as simple as just letting them put on the bibs or tie the laces. We find getting people to commit to the courses, complete the required courses, the hardest. That's when we lose them. And there was a kind of an associated point, I think.
Yeah, Claire, I'll take that one. Yes, that is a step that they do have to take. The one thing I'll say, I had to renew my own vetting there recently for the coaching. It's very, like no matter what activity children are involved in now, that if parents are going to give a handout, they have to go through these steps. And it has become quicker and more straightforward than previously. In terms of the safeguarding, that again, those courses they can be done, I think in the current climate, they've been rolled out online as well. So there is a commitment, but that's part, that is part of it. It is a challenge, but I think to get parents, if they really want to get involved, they will go through that. In terms of the courses, the providing foundation courses and that, what I've seen working well too is a sort of a mentoring or a shadowing where getting people who might be a little bit lacking in confidence about what they can contribute to coaching is to involve them gradually with a big group, not saying, well, there's your group now, there's two of you to look after that group, that it really is they're part of a bigger team, and that gradually over the course of a season that they become more involved and become more confident themselves. But yeah, I can see where some people might be put off by having to go through, but vetting is a part. It's, anything we are getting involved in now, that as you have to go through that process, that's part of it. And I think that people who are interested in giving a commitment will go through the process.
So just to add to what Oliver's just said there, like it's similar to our own club have started now doing some of the safeguarding courses online, and I think that can help get some people over the line as well, because not everybody wants to be doing the award 1, award 2, the coaching aspect of it. So I think if you get them over the minimum, which is the guard of vetting, which is quick and has to be done regardless of any child involved. And again, I think if we kind of take lessons from what we've been doing online over the last 12 months, the safeguarding is certainly one that can be moved online if that's a barrier to people.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, and I think it goes without saying the importance of the safety is paramount. Another question here about how you might struggling to get female coaches, volunteers. Any idea how that might happen?
Yeah, Claire, with that, again, one way, and I saw it happen, heard of a club experience where they had, they found it a challenge getting female coaches involved, was that they actually met with the parents of the team and said, look, we are, like, literally just related as it was, that we need more female coaches. It will contribute greatly, and we'll provide support. You know, you're not going to be landed in the deep end with the team. We'll provide support for you. And again, the direct contact that, you know, if, like, I notice a couple of lines about that we need more female coaches in the weekly notes won't do it. You actually have to, as a committee, say, you know, assign, well, I'm going to contact these two people, you know, that everyone on the committee says, you assign two people to contact. And, you know, when you actually chat to somebody, you tell them what will be involved, what the commitment will be, what supports will be there. You can't really convey that message in a post on social media or on the website in the weekly notes. You have to actually pick up the phone, or in normal times, go and meet, and sort of to allay any anxieties or concerns they have over, like, confidence is a big thing. You know, that, I think that's a huge barrier to people getting involved.
Okay, we're over time. Just one or two points. One was another point here about getting that form for the volunteers out to the clubs, and I'm pretty sure, Oliver, you're covering that in the training material as part of the pack, is it? So clubs should have that.
Yes.
Okay, so that's one way it's getting out. And the other question here is about any ideas. People like the idea of the appreciation day. Anyone any idea of any activity to do or how to mark it?
I can tell you what we did.
Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
I hope there's nobody from my group on. One of the partners of a coach suggested that everybody contribute. I think it was €1 or €2 for a Christmas drink last year. So the parents, one of the parents volunteered with a bucket collection, and we had as many parents and coaches turn up to a haunt close to Croke Park, and I think that kind of broke the ice with a lot of people who've been sitting on the fringes as well. So